Imagine standing in a vast, open forest about 30 million years ago. The air is thick, humid, and carries the scent of ancient ferns and damp earth. Suddenly, the ground begins to vibrate. It's not an earthquake, but the rhythmic thud of something approaching. From behind a canopy of trees, a neck emerges, higher than the roof of a modern three-story building. Then comes the body, a mass of muscle and bones so immense that it blurs the line between a living creature and a geological formation. This isn't a dinosaur. The age of the great reptiles ended tens of millions of years ago. This is a mammal, a relative of the modern rhinoceros, but on a scale that defies every biological limit we thought we understood. This is Parasratharium, the undisputed king of the terrestrial world, a titan that pushed the very physics of mammalian life to the edge. Today we are going on a journey to meet the largest animal that ever walked the earth after the dinosaurs, exploring the incredible engineering of its body, its daily struggle for survival, and the mysterious environmental shifts that ultimately brought this giant's reign to an end. Forget everything you think you know about big animals, because the scale we're talking about today is truly legendary. To truly grasp the size of Paraseratherium, we have to look at the numbers. But numbers alone don't do it justice. Imagine a modern African elephant, the largest land animal we can see today. An elephant is impressive, weighing in at about 6 tons. Now, take that elephant and stack another one on top of it. Then, add a third one. You are still not quite at the weight of a fully grown Paraseratherium. Estimations vary, but experts believe these giants could weigh up to 20 tons. That's about 40,000 pounds of living tissue. Standing at the shoulder, they were nearly 5 meters tall, which is over 16 feet. But when they arched their long, muscular necks upward to reach the highest leaves, their heads could soar nearly 8 meters into the sky. If one walked down a modern city street, it could look through the windows of a third-story apartment without even standing on its tiptoes. But why did it get so big? In nature, size is an arms race. During the Oligocene epoch, the world was changing. Vast forests were beginning to transition, and being tall meant you had zero competition for food, while other mammals were scurrying around the forest floor fighting over fallen fruit and low bushes. Paraseratherium was harvesting the premium quality foliage from the very tops of the trees. It was the giraffe of the rhino world, but with the bulk of a tank. This size also gave it the ultimate defense. Once a Paraseratherium reached adulthood, it had no natural predators. No cat, no wolf, no ancient beast of prey was foolish enough to challenge a creature that could crush them with a single, unintentional step. It lived in a world where it was, quite literally, the mountain that walked. However, being that massive comes with a terrifying set of engineering challenges. Think about the heart. To pump blood all the way up that long neck to a brain nearly 8 meters in the air, the heart of a Paraseratherium had to be an absolute powerhouse. It likely had incredibly thick walls, and a blood pressure that would be a medical emergency for any other creature. Then, there are the legs. To support 20 tons of weight, the legs couldn't just be bigger versions of a horse's legs. They had to be pillars. If you look at the fossils, the limb bones of Paraseratherium are massive, dense, and positioned vertically under the body to act like the columns of a cathedral. They didn't have the luxury of leaping or running at high speeds. Their movement was a deliberate, rolling gait that used momentum to save energy. Every step was a calculation of physics. Speaking of energy, the diet of such a beast is almost incomprehensible. A creature of this size needs to eat almost constantly just to stay alive. Experts estimate that a single Paraseratherium might have needed to consume over half a ton of vegetation every single day. Imagine spending 18 hours of your day just chewing. Their mouths were equipped with specialized, forward-pointing teeth, almost like tusks, designed to strip leaves and bark from tough branches. They didn't have the famous horn of their modern rhino relatives because they didn't need it. When you're that big, your body is the weapon. They likely had a prehensile upper lip, much like a black rhino or a giraffe, allowing them to delicately pick the best leaves while avoiding thorns. The environment they called home was primarily across what is now Central Asia, stretching from China to the Balkans. During their peak, this region was a mosaic of lush forests and spreading parklands. It was a golden age for giants. But life as a titan isn't all easy grazing. Imagine the heat. Large animals have a very hard time shedding body heat because their surface area is small compared to their massive internal volume. Parasauratherium likely had to deal with the constant risk of overheating. They may have been most active during the cooler dawn and dusk hours, or perhaps they had large, highly vascularized ears like elephants to help radiate heat away from their bodies. Every aspect of their existence was a delicate balance between being large enough to dominate and being too large to function. If they were so successful, so indestructible, and so dominant, what happened? Why don't we see 20-ton rhinos roaming the plains of Eurasia today? The downfall of Parasauratherium is one of the most fascinating detective stories in paleontology. It wasn't a single catastrophic event like an asteroid. It was something much more subtle and much more unstoppable. It was a change in the very rhythm of the planet. As we moved from the Oligocene into the Miocene epoch, the Earth's climate began to shift. The world was cooling down and drying out. This process had a devastating effect on the high canopy forests that Parasauratherium depended on. Slowly, over millions of years, the dense woodlands began to thin out, replaced by open grasslands. For a creature that needs half a ton of high-quality leaves every day, this was a disaster. Grass is much harder to digest than leaves, and it grows on the ground, meaning the Parasauratherium's greatest advantage, its height, was becoming useless. They were designed to be high-altitude browsers, not low-level grazers. As the forests shrank, the populations of Parasauratherium became fragmented. They were forced to travel longer and longer distances to find enough food to sustain their massive bulks. This is where the physics of size really starts to work against you. A large animal needs a massive range. If a forest is cut in half by a drying river or a new mountain range, a population of small deer might survive just fine, but a population of titans will find themselves starving within weeks. Large animals are always the most vulnerable to habitat loss because they have no margin for error. They are the first to feel the impact of an environmental squeeze. But there was another factor, one that is often overlooked: the rise of new competition. As the forests opened up, new types of animals began to migrate into the Parasauratherium's territory. Among them were the early ancestors of the elephants, the proboscideans. These new rivals were smaller, more efficient, and possessed a revolutionary technological advantage: the trunk. While Parasauratherium had to move its entire massive neck to reach a branch, an elephant could stand still and use its trunk to reach in every direction. Elephants were also better at digesting a wider variety of plants. In the brutal game of survival, being the biggest isn't always as important as being the most efficient. The Gomphothes and other early elephants began to outcompete the giant rhinos for the remaining patches of forest. There is also the question of reproduction. In the animal kingdom, there is a general rule: the larger the animal, the longer the pregnancy, and the fewer the offspring. A modern elephant is pregnant for nearly 2 years. For a Parasauratherium, a pregnancy might have lasted even longer. This meant that their populations grew incredibly slowly. If a disease swept through, or if a particularly long drought occurred, the population couldn't bounce back quickly. They were playing a high-stakes game where every individual was incredibly precious. Once their numbers dropped below a certain point, they simply couldn't reproduce fast enough to overcome the rising mortality rates caused by the changing climate. And finally, we have to consider the changing landscape of Asia itself. The tectonic plates were shifting. The collision of the Indian subcontinent with Asia was raising the Himalayas. This didn't just change the map, it changed the weather. The mountains began to block moisture-rich air from the south, creating a rain shadow that turned Central Asia into the dry, arid region we know today. The lush paradise of the Parasauratherium was being choked out by the rising mountains. The Titan was trapped between a cooling world, a drying landscape, and more efficient competitors. By about 16 million years ago, the last of the giant rhinos vanished from the fossil record. They didn't go out with a bang, but with a slow, quiet fade into the shadows of history. They left behind bones that would one day stun Victorian explorers and modern scientists alike. In 1910, when the first significant fossils were discovered in what is now Pakistan, the scientific world couldn't believe what they were seeing. They had to rethink the limits of mammalian biology. Studying Parasauratherium today is more than just an exercise in nostalgia for a lost world. It's a lesson in the fragility of giants. We often think that being the biggest and the most powerful makes a species safe, but the history of life on Earth shows us the opposite. The bigger you are, the more you depend on a stable environment. The giants are often the first to disappear when the world shifts. It happened to the dinosaurs. It happened to Parasauratherium. and it serves as a reminder for the giants of our own time, like the blue whale and the African elephant. The legacy of Paraceratherium lives on in our understanding of biomechanics. When engineers look at how to build structures that support massive weight, they sometimes look at the limb bones of these ancient rhinos. When biologists study how blood pressure is regulated in giraffes, they use Paraceratherium as a theoretical model for the extreme ends of physiology. They were a magnificent experiment by nature, a testament to what is possible when life is given millions of years of stability to grow. Imagine again that forest 30 million years ago. The titan moves away, its footsteps fading into the distance. It had no way of knowing that the mountains were rising and the rain was stopping. It lived in a perpetual present of abundance and strength. Today we stand on the ground where it once walked, holding its massive teeth in our hands, marveling at a time when rhinos were as large as houses and Eurasia was a garden for giants. If you ever find yourself at a museum standing next to a cast of a Paraceratherium humerus, take a moment to look at the sheer thickness of the bone. That bone didn't just support weight, it supported a way of life that has vanished forever. It represents the peak of land mammal evolution, a moment when the conditions of our planet were just right to allow a warm-blooded creature to reach a scale that we usually only associate with the ocean. Interestingly, the story of Paraceratherium also challenges our perceptions of the age of mammals. We often think of the time after the dinosaurs as a period of small, scurrying creatures that slowly grew into what we see today. But Paraceratherium shows us that mammals reached their maximum terrestrial size surprisingly quickly. Only 35 million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs, mammals had already produced a creature that could rival some of the largest medium-sized sauropods. Evolution doesn't always take the slow road. Sometimes it hits the gas pedal when an ecological niche is wide open, but as quickly as they rose, they fell. The environment is the ultimate architect and the ultimate destroyer. No matter how many tons of muscle you have, you are still a servant to the leaves and the rain. That is the true secret of the largest land mammal ever. Its power was an illusion provided by a specific climate. When the climate withdrew its favor, the titan had nowhere to go. Today, Central Asia is a land of steppes and deserts, home to hardy, smaller animals that can survive on very little. The memory of the giant rhino is etched only in the stone, but in that stone we find the thrill of discovery. Every time a new fossil is unearthed in the Bikti Hills of Pakistan or the deserts of Mongolia, we get a clearer picture of this incredible creature. We learn about its social structure, likely living in small herds or as solitary bulls like modern rhinos. We learn about its growth rate, reaching its massive size in just a few decades. Each discovery is a window into a world that was just as real as our own, but vastly more epic in scale. Think about the silence after the last Paraceratherium passed away. For millions of years, the sound of their movement was a constant part of the Asian landscape. Then, nothing. The birds and the smaller mammals continued, but the heavy thud of 20 tons was gone. The forests became quieter. The high branches remained untouched, slowly changing as the trees evolved without the pressure of a giant browser. The world adapted, as it always does, but it was undoubtedly a smaller place. As we look at the challenges facing our planet today, the story of the giant rhino feels more relevant than ever. It teaches us about the interconnectedness of moisture, mountains, and the food chain. It shows us that when you pull on one thread of the environment, like the humidity or the forest cover, the whole tapestry can unravel for the species at the top. We are currently the giants of the planet, not in physical size, but in our impact. Like the Paraceratherium, we depend on a very specific set of environmental conditions to maintain our way of life. The fall of the giant rhino wasn't a failure of the animal. It was a masterpiece of biological engineering that simply ran out of the fuel it was designed to burn. It was a specialist at a time when the world began to demand generalists. There is a certain dignity in that. They didn't shrink, they didn't become something else. They were the kings of their era, and they went out as kings, leaving the crown to smaller, more adaptable creatures. To think that such a creature existed at all is a gift to our imagination. It reminds us that Earth is a planet of endless surprises. If a rhino can grow to the size of a house, what else has been lost to time? What other giants are waiting to be found in the strata of the Earth? The story of Paraceratherium is a call to explore, to dig, and to wonder. It is a reminder that our current world is just one chapter in a very long book. Consider the sheer physical presence of a living Paraceratherium, the sound of its breathing like a massive bellows, the heat radiating off its skin, the way sunlight would filter through the trees and hit its elephantine hide. It wouldn't have looked like a monster. It would have looked like a part of the forest itself, a peaceful grazing titan that spent its days in a rhythmic cycle of eating and resting. It wasn't a hunter, it had no ego. It was simply a living expression of the Earth's productivity at that moment in time. Paleontologists continue to debate its exact appearance. Did it have a trunk? Probably not, but that prehensile lip was likely very prominent. Did it have hair? In the warm Oligocene, it likely had sparse hair, much like an elephant or a rhino, to help with cooling. Every detail we piece together brings it closer to life. We can almost see it now, reaching for a branch of a prehistoric acacia-like tree, the wood snapping with the force of its jaw, the leaves disappearing into a mouth that could swallow a basketball. The extinction of Paraceratherium also marked the end of a specific kind of ecosystem, a world where the mega-browser niche was filled by a mammal. Since then, no land mammal has ever come close to reaching that size again. The elephants are the closest, and even the largest of them are only about a third of the weight of the greatest giant rhinos. It seems that the window for 20-ton mammals has closed, perhaps forever. The gravity of Earth and the calorie density of modern plants might simply not allow it anymore. This makes Paraceratherium a unique survivor in our collective memory. It represents the absolute ceiling of what a mammal can achieve on land. It is the Mount Everest of our evolutionary history. When we study it, we are studying the limits of our own biological family. We are seeing what we, as mammals, are capable of when all the conditions are perfect. It is a moment of pride for the mammalian lineage. So the next time you see a rhinoceros at a zoo, look past its horn and its armored skin. Look at its steady, sturdy legs and its calm, ancient eyes. Imagine it growing, stretching, and expanding until it towers over the trees. Imagine it losing its horn but gaining a neck that can reach the clouds. You are looking at the descendant of the greatest titan to ever walk the earth. The blood of giants still flows in those veins, even if the world they once ruled has turned to dust and desert. The story of the largest land animal and its quiet departure from this world is a powerful narrative of change. It tells us that nothing is permanent, not even the mountains, and certainly not the giants. But it also tells us that life is incredibly resilient and inventive. Even as the giant rhino was fading, the ancestors of the animals we love today were already finding new ways to thrive. The end of one story is always the beginning of another. As the sun sets over the ancient Asian plains in our minds, we see the silhouette of the last Paraceratherium. It is a lonely figure in a changing world, but it stands tall. It has lived a life of dominance and peace. It has walked across a continent and seen the forests flourish. Its journey is over, but its story is ours to keep. We learn from its life, we learn from its end, and we carry its memory forward into a future where we must be the stewards of the giants that remain. The mystery of what killed the giant rhino isn't a mystery of malice, but a mystery of a cooling star and a shifting crust. It was nature doing what nature does, remaking itself. The Paraceratherium wasn't a victim of its size. It was a glory of its size, and even though it is gone, it still towers over us, teaching us about the incredible, breathtaking scale of life on this beautiful, ever-changing planet. We don't need to fear the end of the giants if we understand why they go. We only need to appreciate them while they are here and respect the bones they leave behind. The Paraceratherium was here. It was massive, and it was magnificent. And in the grand timeline of the Earth, that is more than enough. Its echo still vibrates in the ground of Central Asia, a ghostly reminder of a time when mammals were truly, undeniably, the biggest things on Earth. Let this story be a reminder to look up at the high branches of the trees every once in a while and imagine a head looking back at you from the prehistoric past. The world is full of hidden history, and the giant rhino is one of its most incredible chapters. From the humid forests of the Oligocene to the dry hills of the Miocene, the journey of Paraceratherium is a testament to the endless creativity of evolution. It was the largest that ever lived, and it remains the largest in our hearts and minds. We leave the titan now, resting in the deep layers of the earth, where its bones turn to stone and its story waits for the next curious soul to pick up a shovel and start digging. The age of giants may be over for now, but the wonder of what they achieved will live on as long as we continue to ask, what lived here before us? And in the case of the giant rhino, the answer is something truly wonderfully massive.